Hi, Kara.
Hello, how are you?
Fine, thank you. How about you?
Good, good. Pretty excited for this meeting today, actually.
Yeah, absolutely.
While you're on here, before anyone else, have you looked at the Interoperability Sig Road Map recently?
No, not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tough question. Yeah, no, I was just wondering how we should update it because we keep mentioning maybe going over it, but I don't know how much we're evolving it and how we should. And I just thought, while you're on before the meeting starts, I could ask your opinion.
Yeah, no, I haven't had a chance to look at it in detail.
Okay, fair enough. What element of what we discussed interests you the most?
Yeah, essentially, interoperability in general is very important for me.
Okay, yes.
Since I'm mainly working on Piper and related topics, and their interoperability is also a very big topic.
Yeah.
Trying to run on various orchestrators, for example.
So unified workflow orchestrator.
Yeah, not necessarily, but
Okay.
Making it rather easy for teams to switch also.
Yes.
Or distribute workloads. Or, yeah, prevent lock-ins.
Hello, Matthias.
Hi, Matthias.
Hello.
Hi, Fatih.
Hey, Fatih. I guess while we're waiting, y'all can add your names to the HackMD doc. Hello, Shruti.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah,
Hello,
thank
Emil.
you for having me, Carl.
I'm really looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you.
We'll first just go over some of our action items and ongoing discussion topics, and then we'll have your presentation. So leaving the best for last. Okay, well, I guess we should get started. A few people might come in the next couple of minutes, but might as well start on time. So we're going over our action items. Actually, let me share. Actually, can I ask you to share, Fatih? Is that all right? All right.
Yes.
I can do it, okay.
I can, yes. So do you see it now?
Yep, perfect.
Okay. Good.
Great. So we'll start with our action items. And welcome to the Interoperability Sig, everyone. We have Shruti, who is going to give a presentation and demo if there's time for the demo, but it's only present on Cloud Events plugin for Jenkins and improving interoperability for Jenkins in the cloud. So that should be great. It's really exciting. But first we'll go over some of our action items and ongoing talk. So action items, we have Matty is to start a new discussion on other metadata standardization efforts. Matty, are you on the call? I don't think he is.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Sorry.
Yeah, I started a GitHub discussion about that.
Perfect.
Yeah, there wasn't much response.
That's great. I actually had for myself, I had some questions on how this relates to SPDX becoming recognized standard for software bill of materials and how this would booster all the associated technologies. I don't know if you want to say something about that.
Yeah, I mean, based on what I read in the standard, it seems pretty orthogonal to SPDX. Like SPDX seems to define some attributes for the files that could be in a software release or a software package, but the Intedo defines a way to describe how different parties can sort of check each other's work in a using cryptography, how that stuff was produced and whether the output is well formed and things like that.
Yeah.
So they seem pretty complementary as far as I could tell.
Yes, definitely. I think it's great news because the more standardized this becomes, the more that it's clear how people should approach this is really, really useful for end practitioners. It really helps to just remove a set of questions and make the best path easier for people. So that's good. How can we, as a SIG, move forward your discussion, and what should we be focusing on?
I think maybe it would be helpful if we could get some perspectives on whether the standard is kind of well suited to different continue like CD or CI related tasks, and how people could see it kind of fitting into some problems that they've seen. I'm not much of a cryptography expert, so it's kind of hard for me to make a judgment call on what's missing or what's good or what could be improved there, or if there's any use cases that are important for CD that just haven't been considered or addressed in that standard. Does that make sense? Yes,
that's very good. So you were looking for sort of end user input. What are people doing? What are they struggling with? What they need? Is that right?
Yeah, or like if there's any use cases that seem important in that space that just aren't addressed at all.
Yeah, great.
I forgotten to comment on the discussion you opened, Matty. I have been looking at Intoto as well, and I found the plugin created by the Intoto. Was it Santiago? I think he is one of the maintainers of Intoto project, and it seems they attempted to do something with Jenkins, but there wasn't much. This plugin, there wasn't much traction with the plugin. And related to this whole SBOM stuff, I also found a GitHub action for SPDX, automatic generation of SPDX bill of materials. So it looks like different people are trying to bring these things into CI/CD domain, but there doesn't seem to me to be too much, how to say, cross collaboration going on. Like Intoto is doing something, SPDX is doing another thing, and like we are talking about these things here within our group. Like, I don't know, maybe this is a discussion for the topic we have in the agenda, but just want to give some feedback from my investigations when I Google things for these different things.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, and we've kind of touched on SPDX becoming an internationally recognized standard for software bill of materials, which is pretty exciting and good news. Version 3 of that is in progress right now. And so again, we are just looking at the question of what could we as a SIG contribute to that effort?
Yeah, I can add some context for Jenkins because yeah, we were working on LFX security integration for Jenkins, which is a bit tricky because of our packaging format. And the agreements there was that we would be producing SBOM and uploading it directly to Snyk servers. And yeah, as a part of that, I created basically a POM XML generator. But from what I see in SPDX, I can generate it too. So for example, for Maven use cases and for Jenkins packaging use cases, we can have SPDX support quite quickly if there is user demand for that. And yeah, it could be one of examples how we use it for CDF use cases.
Like, I think, like, again, this is like as a user, like when I think about all this SBOM stuff, like we all use certain CI/CD tool, technology orchestrator or whatever. I think like since this supply chain and SBOM stuff became pretty hot lately, it has always been important, but it's more obvious now with, you know, White House executive order and National Telecommunication Industry Association releasing white papers after white paper. I think as a user, I think this should be somehow de facto built into the CI/CD technology, so users don't need to, you know, spend a lot of time to, you know, learn about what this supply chain is, what the bill of materials means, how much effort they should put into getting this thing up and running. And I don't know, like it's like you need bill of materials for the bill of materials tools to start with. You know, there are different tools like SPDX becoming standard made it, you know, visible, but there are others like Cyclone DX and SWID suite and so on. Like, I don't know, when I read about these things, I get lost after a while, jumping link to link and finding, you know, blog posts and this GitHub Actions, plugins, and how these things come together, how they can be utilized in proper manner in our CI/CD pipelines become a bit difficult. And if it is difficult for people like us who are involved in CI/CD domain, both within open source and within our, you know, organizations, it would be even more difficult for, you know, developers who are actually not really into details of CI/CD orchestration systems or CI/CD systems and tools and technologies. So that's kind of my feeling after spending some time on reading all these things. So how we can make things easier for, I don't mean bad when I say average developer, but how we can make these things easy to use for developers, so these things become part of their day work rather than them being enforced by some security person within their organization and so on.
Yeah, so for that, there are two parts. Firstly, generation of SPDX, and secondly, consumption. Generation can be done relatively easy because there are not that many developer tools on the market, and yeah, common tools like Maven, Gradle, there are only a limited way to build projects there, and SPDX generation could be integrated there out of the box. And then basically this is what we plan to do for Jenkins plugins, just in our parent form. Yeah, you can take Maven jar plugin, whatever, and generate SPDX definition or other BOM. The problem is rather with consumption, because even if you release this file, there should be something that would be reading that and at least taking some action on that. Until it happens, it will just hang in the air. And for that, I'm not sure, do we see any generic use cases for SBOM consumption?
I think the most obvious use case I can tell is like when it comes to enterprises, for example, in order for you to include a certain dependency in your product, you have to ensure it, it doesn't have any licensing legal issues, so it doesn't open up all these, lawyery stuff. So that is like most basic use case. Like in order for you to be able to consume that dependency, you have to have the dependencies analyzed, all their licenses are, somehow extracted. Like that is the most basic use case, and you can add some extra stuff on top of that, which is what has been discussed within SPDX community as well. Like how you can incorporate security vulnerability information in the SPDX, or sorry, SBOM. Like these things, you can go further if you start thinking about what else we as users need to be careful when it comes to consuming the dependencies, and you start with the SBOM, hoping that SBOM will give you some kind of starting point, at least telling you what you are bringing in. So you know what you are bringing in. What you do with it, like if you include it in your product development or not, is like second step. But the very first step is just simply to have that SBOM in place, which is not the case, unfortunately. Yes, some communities start adopting that, at least they are generating some kind of SBOM, but for majority of the communities, it's not there. And just generating that is a problem. And the other thing, like it's tooling technology problem. For example, again, I've been looking at SPDX a lot. There are few tools there supporting different programming languages and frameworks and package managers like Maven, Go, and whatever. But those tools, they don't, produce the same output. Their logic to determine dependencies and generate SBOMs for those differ. Like with one tool, you get 60 dependencies and SBOM for that. With another tool, you get like 85 dependencies, because how the dependency graph is constructed and how that information is captured in SBOM is different. So that is like, even before going further, you hit that problem. One recent example I faced was like, we analyzed same primary force with two different tools. One tool reported 65 dependencies, the other tool reported 400 dependencies. So which one is correct? According to both of them, like both the tool developers, they're each correct. It's kind of, it's not just generating SBOM, but just identifying what are those secondary dependencies. There is some issue with that part as well. So it's like can of worms.
Isn't it something for SPDX standard to define?
SPDX, again, they host some tools in their SPDX organization, and this SPDX SBOM generator is one of such tools, but they are not. There was a discussion of not doing that, because if they go that path, some people may think those tools are blessed by SPDX community. SPDX is there for spec, and this discussion was on their mail list. So they are talking about not hosting tools in SPDX.
And I totally agree with their approach. I also wouldn't host tools, but the specification could be more explicit what expected from the listing. Because if you say one tool shows 60, another shows 400 dependencies, and both of them are right, the problem is rather with the specification, because it wasn't explicit enough to say what needs to be displayed.
But is it SPDX problem actually? I think it goes before than that, because SPDX is just like SPDX gives you certain, way of creating SBOM with references and these relationships and file info, license info, and so on. But what gets included in that final report comes from the package manager, and after the dependencies are analyzed by some tool before you actually start generating SPDX SBOM. So it's like even before SPDX.
Yeah, right. But we can invert it otherwise. So I'm a tool developer. I'm reading SPDX specification. How do I understand what exactly should I produce as an output? So for me, it's kind of a real problem because it's exactly what I'm working in Sneak right now. It's just not a SPDX, it's another JSON format. And yeah, there we just list all dependencies on the library level. But if I develop a tool which produces SPDX compatible specification, as a tool developer, I need to have enough information to understand what I need to produce. So if the specification doesn't answer this question, it will be really difficult to create something universal for inter-exchange of SBOMs.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry for
hijacking discussion, but you know, I kind of like got confused when I started reading all these different things and comparing things with each other. It's like it's very difficult to, you know, make like pick and choose one. Like again, I am not after picking one over the other, and I was hoping that when I run these things, I get pretty identical output, but that wasn't the case.
Well, it's a job of spec to set the requirements. If the requirements are blurry, then the result will be blurry as well. Yes, sorry for this red holding. It's just a painful topic for any SBOM requirement.
Okay, any more comments or things to bring up for discussion for the SPDX in toto discussion?
So when Katie was presenting, she talked about, I think she used it was pedigree and provenance, including build information into it. Has anybody heard anything more about that discussion?
I think Matti, I think it was you who put some comments on that discussion, and then Kate started a document somewhere. I'm not sure if I misremember. Yeah, yes, this is your. I think Kate created this Google Doc to gather some input from us, and yeah, Matthias, you are there as well.
Yeah, I didn't see any updates on it or answers, but I was wondering if there was anything more on this, the part or not. But I take that as a no then.
I'm wondering if like we should somehow highlight this in SPDX mail list as well to get some, you know, or I don't know how to proceed with this, to be honest. Sorry, Matthew, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was just wondering if maybe it would be a good idea to reach out to Kate offline to see what she thinks is sort of the next step, since she kind of started the document. But I think it also might be helpful to have more input on the discussion from different folks about what, like, you know, either agreeing or disagreeing about whether some of these additions are you know, useful or kind of maybe adding some new ideas.
Related to that one, actually, I bumped into like that. There was a thread happening in SPDX mail list. If I can find it, I don't know, SPDX groups. They are thinking of having some kind of more flexible approach. Like I don't know the word. Where was that? They are thinking about some kind of profile thing with depending on like the use case, and build could be, you know, one of the. Where was that? Sorry for browsing quickly. If I can. So they are kind of after including security as well. So that will be part of upcoming SPDX versions. Sorry. Anyway, they were talking about some profiles and so on. But yeah, I think it's the right time to bring these things to SPDX community while they are working on version 3. That's in some way what I was going to say. Yeah.
Excellent. So how should we bring this forward to the SPDX community to discuss with them for version 3? Are you involved in that work, Fatih, or anyone else?
I am just following the mail list. I'm not brave enough to shoot mails there yet.
I can try to reach out to Kate and see if she had like some ideas about how to take forward the discussion in the Google Doc. So if you want to assign an action item to me for that, that would be fine.
Great, thank you, Maddie.
So I'm wondering if it makes sense to reach out to Santiago as well with regards to Intoto, because Kate joined one of our meetings in the past. It was April or something, talking about SPDX. Maybe like if people like Matty, if you find it useful, we can try inviting him to one of upcoming meetings to hear more about Intoto and perhaps ask questions.
Yeah, that seems like a good idea.
Okay. Maybe Clara, you can action me on that. I know Dan Lorenz works with Santiago, so I can spam Dan to get to Santiago.
Sure. And actually looking at these action items, I was quite excited about the SPDX and Intoto discussion. I skipped forward right into them. So Fatih, you were to look at integrating GitHub discussions to Slack. How is that going?
It doesn't exist, so
okay,
we can close that. Yeah.
No, okay. And Tracy's not on the call, so we'll bump that forward. Okay. Good. Any other comments or things to bring up for Intoto and SPDX discussion? We can move forward. Cool. We should look at the Interoperability Sig Road Map. That would be great if everyone looked at it. I feel like it should, we feel like it should evolve a bit from where it is. And if anybody has anything they'd like to say about that now, please jump in and say how you think the roadmap should be evolving. It seems it naturally is. We have different new focuses, but you know, if anybody's thinking about anything particular, you can jump in now.
I was thinking about this actually, and maybe we can, mark some things as done and they become part of our day-to-day, like week-to-week work within the SIG, like this knowledge transfer. I think today's presentation from Shruti will be our 25th presentation or something. So it's happening and we should continue doing it. But at the same time, it would be good to say, like, we have been doing this already. So we kind of hit our aim and we are collecting end user requirements. I think we had some references to events. So we can consider ourselves as successful given that we have a SIG for events doing cool stuff. I think we can somehow capture those things and mark them as done and add new areas like the supply chain seems to be a natural topic to look at based on the past conversations and based on the original discussion starting with standardized metadata. So that's kind of how we can evolve this. And in addition to that, for example, the shipwright project joining the foundation is was kind of good to see, because like originally our focus was mainly on CI/CD orchestration tools like Spinnaker, Tekton, Jenkins, Jenkins X, and so on. And given that foundation is like kind of broadening its reach to other frameworks or other areas within the CI/CD domain, like build, test, and so on, perhaps we can, somehow highlight those things to start talking about like how those things relate to CI/CD and so on. But that's, I think, obviously.
Yep. And on the roadmap as it is, the one of the lower sections on standardized frameworks, so it would be expanding in that area.
Yeah, I know how far we could go with standardization, or what standardization means to different people. At least, again, this ties back to this metadata thing. Like when a test framework produces some kind of result, or it at least has I am done, tests are successful, how that information is sent back to orchestrator, for example, and then to developer, so the developer could take a quick action to fix an issue and so on. So that kind of, otherwise, like if we go too deep in like standardizing test frameworks and so on, that will never happen. But at least we can highlight some of these things from developer or user perspective.
Yeah. It's interesting we've got for later event standardizations, but I feel like that's also moving well forward now in practice.
Yeah, I think we can, since event sig is there, we can drop those. I don't know if dropping is the right word, but at least say this work has already been driven by SIG events, and close collaboration between Interoperability and SIG events is part of, is in our roadmap. We will not be, doing these things, perhaps events stuff, but we will be talking and we will be working together. So that is the way we can perhaps talk about it in our roadmap. I know what events people think, like I see Andrea, Emil, Matthias with us.
Yeah, I'm thinking if we should state, I mean, what we report, what we do in the event SIG, that should be reported here on this SIG interop as well. It feels a bit like the game of whispers. But either we can leave them over to yeah.
Yeah, what I was trying to say, like some of these things are like, okay, they can be achieved in other means, not just events, but other means. But some of these things are like, I think they explicitly state events somewhere. So we can at least, point to, you see later, like we should drop this. Like we are not like, exactly, obviously it would be good for interoperability, but it should be part of, or it's part of your roadmap. So we can at least say, we will be tagging along with event SIG, and whatever comes out of event SIG is a win for interoperability.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, but I don't think we might need to report on those on the interoperability roadmap, maybe, but could just refer to the event SIG for those kind of event specific items. But yeah, as you say, it's about interoperability, and in some sense, event SIG is still a part of the interoperability effort within CDF, of course. As is the metadata.
So for the roadmap, it's really a matter of sort of drawing the lines of different work streams a little differently. So we have regular ones like knowledge sharing, and some work streams like for event standardization have really been taken over as their own subject area with the event SIG and are less on our roadmap. And then we have new developing focus on SPDX and quite a lot on metadata, which is probably in here. Does that sound about right, Fatih? And anyone? Yeah.
I don't see any reference to metadata here.
So we should have that.
Yeah,
sure.
it's like that's been what we have been talking about since beginning of this year.
Yeah.
And the other thing is like policy is not here, so policy could be, made part of the roadmap. Continue digging the domain a bit more, because like communities start talking about policy-driven CI/CD and so on. Like, since we start talking about these things, we should continue talking about these things. Maybe someone comes and starts up a policy SIG, which could be a big, win for us.
Agree.
Well, I can take an action and send a pull request, heavily removing event stuff and referring to event SIG, and adding some headings for metadata or supply chain in general, perhaps. And then under supply chain, SPOM is one thing that is related to metadata and so on. And policy is kind of related to supply chain as well, because like if you have some dependency within your SPOM with known vulnerabilities, your policy should block that progressing further within your pipeline and so on. So it's kind of, it looks a bit, interconnected to each other. And then send that pull request and see where we are in a few weeks.
Yeah. And I would imagine that policy works very strongly with Intoto as well.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Because I think based on the actors and stuff, like who is allowed to do what and who is not supposed to do this, and then you can, they are kind of connected to each other. Yeah, exactly.
Good. All right. Fatih, I'll work with you a little bit on the roadmap. We can do that async out of this meeting. Any other commentary on roadmap? Would anyone else like to add something? Okay, great. I'm super excited because Shruti has agreed to present her work on Jenkins interoperability with cloud events and her work on the cloud events plugin for Jenkins.
Yes, thank you so much, Cara, and I'm super excited to be here and also share the work. I'll go ahead and share my screen. So this is a cloud events plugin for Jenkins. And of course, the purpose behind it was to enhance interoperability between Jenkins and primarily CI/CD tools, which are already using cloud events as part of their event-driven architecture. So this has been developed as a GSOC project alongside Cara and other members of the CDF community, and also taking inspiration from some of Andrea's work on event SIG with Tecton and Captain POC. So this is the repository of the plugin, and there's also an article on interoperability and cloud events, but I feel like you guys are not going to need it because it really talks about interoperability, the need for it in CI/CD systems, and direct and indirect interoperability, and how the Jenkins Cloud Events plugin is going to eliminate the need for maintaining external tools to be talking with and working with other systems and CI/CD systems which are using cloud events. So again, the cloud events plugin, direct versus indirect interoperability. If we have multiple tools in a CI/CD workflow, as workflows are very complex these days and they do tend to have multiple tools, it becomes really hard to communicate because each of them is speaking a different language. Essentially, each of them has a different payload for how their event is looking like. And with the Cloud Events plugin, and if we wanted to integrate cloud events inside of Jenkins, so we can go forward with making that common language for events, integrate with Jenkins and test it out with other systems which are already working quite extensively with cloud events. So a part of this is also, I'll scroll back down to the article and looking at one of the people, like this is something that was taken as an inspiration from Andres and the UNSIG team work on POC with Tecton, Captain, Cloud Events, and also Knative. And we are kind of working alongside this and developed POC for the Cloud Events plugin. And we will take a look at that in a bit. I will move on ahead so the plugin allows users to configure Jenkins as a source and a sink, going to emit and consume cloud events. And so, as I said, this was a GSOP project. In the first part, we made Jenkins as a source, and I started working on Jenkins as a sink. So for Jenkins as a source, again, the idea is getting a URL for the sink and choosing all of the events which will be sent over to the sink via HTTP. So why use the Cloud Events plugin for Jenkins? Obviously, the big thing is it standardizes communication between Jenkins and other CI/CD system, allowing that indirect and easy interoperability where you're not needing to maintain external tools to talk with every other service, which is in that pipeline. But we are just using that one common language for events. All the tools can understand. Obviously, the end tool or the sink, whatever the sink is going to be needing some sort of configuration on its end to figure out how it's going to treat that particular event. Similar to how if you're communicating with a person using the same language that we're understanding, you know, each person will like communicate or do a task specific to what was said. So it's a similar idea here. And we can build complex end-to-end pipelines extending multiple CI/CD systems, which use cloud events without needing any extra tools or without needing any extra efforts, except obviously for the sink to see how it's going to need that or how it's going to use that particular event or events which are coming out from Jenkins. And integrate other systems with Jenkins in a loosely coupled, scalable, and tool agnostic manner. Again, we're removing that tight coupling by creating a way. So each of the tool which is in a pipeline, whether that's Tecton, Captain, Knative, each of them can use the similar format without making any changes inside of Jenkins or how events are emitted from Jenkins are also consumed. And scalable, again, because we can move ahead adding a lot of different tools into our pipeline or into our workflow, and it obviously is in a way that's tool agnostic. And we are eliminating the need to maintain tool-specific adapters for communicating with systems. So direct interoperability by having that particular plugin or that particular tool is eliminated because it's a common language and it's a common event format which gets emitted from Jenkins and also consumed from Jenkins, which other tools can easily use. So we struggled at releasing the plugin for a bit, but the good news is it's now released. The first iteration is out, and we'll take a look at how the UI and the configuration is looking at right now. So during the first iteration, we did design it in 2 different iterations. So during the first one, the Jenkins Cloud Events plugin UI for Jenkins as a source, and this was under Jenkins global config. So I'm looking at, let's go back to the dashboard. So we're looking at the global configuration, so to make sure that it's going to apply across all of the the global settings, and then we're choosing the sync type. So right now, this was tested out with the Kafka sync as well, and that works as well. But just choosing a standard HTTP sync. And this is something, the broker URL, which is taken from the POC that we will take a look at in just a bit, and all of the events which are supported right now. So we have job kind of events and node failures, and going to be adding events for test suite, and if that failed in the past, That was a question that came up during one of the event sig team, and I think that's a really good idea of implementing it inside of Jenkins, Cloud Events plugin. So yes, the type of events we already looked at, and the structure of the events, which is going to be sent by. So this is how the structure is going to look like for, let's say, the queue event. We have standard cloud events, metadata, the spec version, ID, the type, source, and the event data. Obviously, the event metadata or payload, it's going to look different for each kind of event. And again, it is on to this thing to decide how it's going to work alongside any event data that's entered. And the second iteration was when we started having questions about, you know, how are we going to implement a transient fault tolerant way of sending cloud events, and how can, if or how can the plugin handle that asynchronous communication, which is really important for event-driven architecture, making sure that none of your event or none of that data is being missed and everything can be acted upon. And obviously we wanted to also see in like a real example of how can this plugin work alongside other CI/CD tools, which are currently built around cloud events. And did we achieve our goal of building a tool agnostic eventing system for Jenkins? So this is where our POC and the event sig POC really held in moving forward and deciding how we can test all of those questions out. So what we decided was using a Knative Cloud Events broker, which is again the Knative default broker, which is going to be listing to events or cloud events emitted from Jenkins. And we had a Knative trigger also to test out if filtering based on attributes and based on metadata and event data is going to work. And that directly is going to go onto cloud events, Tecton, like that cloud event will go onto the Tecton trigger, which triggers a task run inside Tecton. So I'll move on showing some files. There are a bit of files, and all of them are, again, inspiration from event sig POC. The Knative default broker, and I'm just showing the relevant 2 or 3 files which are relevant to the particular POC with the Cloud Events plugin. So here is the trigger for Knative, the Knative Cloud Events broker and the Knative trigger right here. So this is a file for that where we're specifying a filter on the CE type. So this particular attribute, we just wanted to test out if filtering can work as well, because this is also an important concept for Jenkins as a sync. Just wanted to test out, and that's why we're implementing filtering on the cloud event metadata. This is, you know, we're looking for if a job has entered waiting stage, and then it's when we want to trigger a particular task run inside of Tecton. So again, this is one of the definition for the Tecton triggers, where we're extracting information from the like the header or the cloud events metadata and the cloud events body right here, the CE type and display name, which is for the display name for the particular kind of job. And since we're looking for entered waiting, so we're talking about a specific job inside of Jenkins. And this is going to be passed back into, or like as parameters into the task run, where we're just echoing it out to test if the entire system is going to work or not. So go back. And also, so here we have the using the default broker. We did test this out with a Kafka broker, but I'll just use the default broker. And configuring, so the broker is already added, and I'll just save this information, and all of these events will be sent over to the Knative broker. But since we have the filter enabled, it's only going to act upon the job enter to queue kind of event and move that on to Tecton trigger, which is going to trigger a task run. So I have this job which I can build and look into the Tecton dashboard that I have running. So this is where we can see if, you know, all of the payload information that we sent and the sort of parameters, if they were being used correctly. So this is the job name that we said and the event type. So we have the job name and the event type is Sarah here. And again, the idea is to see for both Jenkins as a source and also as a sync, what kind of filters can we set on event body, on event metadata, and how can we pass that information between different CI/CD systems. So if I had another sync inside of this, if I had like Captain, it would be a very similar process of sending events over, just specifying another sync to use. And I'll move back to the POC just for another second. So the same thing can also work alongside having multiple sort of tools, which are also defined as async for Jenkins. And also we can reverse this and test this out with when Jenkins as a sync has been developed, which is kind of in the works and should be getting to it pretty soon. And yeah, so again, going back to the questions, why did we choose the Knative broker? Was again, we wanted to implement that transient fault tolerant way, and the Knative broker really helped us with that and implementing the retry strategy and implementing asynchronous communication, making sure that all of the events are not being lost and being sent to the sync as they are, even if they're not as they're happening, but also maybe later on. And did we achieve our goal of building a tool agnostic system? So as I said, we tested this out with Captain and also with having a Kafka broker. So it did work. So it seems like a positive effort, and that's really amazing. And obviously would love to hear your guys' thoughts and opinions. And here's, again, a big thank you to CDF and GSOC for an amazing summer and a really amazing project. And this was really fun building, but more importantly, it became really all into perspective, and we designed this POC and built out with not just Jenkins, but other tools which are using cloud events, and just understanding how vast the scope of interoperability with cloud events is. I'll stop sharing here. Thank you very much, everyone. And I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts and feedback and comment.
Thank you for your presentation, Shruti, and all your work this summer. It's awesome. It's a great plugin. That's fantastic.
Thank you, Cora. It was so much fun developing it, and like working alongside all of you has been really amazing. And it's just such a big scope, and I'm realizing it every time I was working. I'm like just realizing, wow, this is so vast and so huge and so fun.
Definitely. Do we have any questions for Shruti or comments?
Nice presentation, thanks. I do have one question. I guess I missed a bit the part of how I understood that the plugin can be used for Jenkins to act as a sync as well as a source of event. Is that correct?
Yeah, so for now, what has been built to be published is Jenkins as a source, and I have just started working on implementing Jenkins as a sync. Last week, I was not able to finish it up entirely during GSOC, but yes, correct.
Oh, cool. Thanks.
Thank you, Andrea. And like a lot of the POC has been inspired by your work. So also thank you for that. It has really helped testing the plugin out.
Yeah, it's great that you were able to use that.
Thanks for the presentation. I was curious about when you're using Jenkins as a source, how you decided to go about representing the different events that are sort of internal to Jenkins as cloud events. Was there like a standard that you followed, or was it kind of something you had to come up with on your own?
Yeah, that's actually a really great question. And so for just designing events, I think a lot of it came from existing plugins and how they are structuring their events, especially for, if you have a GitHub kind of event where something isn't published, so you want to do something, or a notification status plugin. That was also one of the plugins. So taking a mix of inspiration from all of those plugins and making sure that it's representative enough. So if another CI/CD system depends on a particular kind of information, it should be getting that information. So also working with the entire like the team for the plugin and deciding on if this structure, if this metadata, if this data is enough, or if another CI/CD system is depending on it, would they be able to go off of it and build the information that they need?
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear. It seems like it could be kind of a good input to the kind of the events interest group.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea because I think I definitely was looking for if there was a standard of what can we send over, what does another system expect, how can we make sure that the other system gets the exact information that it's going to need. But I think for now is just looking at, okay, what can we extract from this event? Or for example, if it's a queue entered waiting event, what all information can we extract, and just like putting it all together and then send it over. But that's I think that's a really great idea and also important.
And just kind of following up on that, like, as part of your project, did you end up creating any documentation of like what the event formats are, or like what the different fields that you added were, or is it like the best way to learn about that would that just be to kind of look through the code and figure out how each event is being handled?
So for how each event is emitted, like the payload itself, all that particular information is inside of the GitHub repository and also where the plugin is available. But in terms of what kind of events are emitted, also that's the information that's on there. But we are still sort of like looking into implementing other event kinds inside of Jenkins, like whatever is internal, like test passing and all of that kind of events. So for that, like while it's in development, I think we'll still have to sort of look through the code to understand, okay, what needs to be done, but what's already published and what's actually available in the event type and the kind and everything, that's on the repository. I think because it has like an event metadata and event data structure, each of them is very different for the kind of event. So I can share my screen again. And so for example, like if you have a queue entered waiting event, the event metadata, event data looks very different than how a build event is looking like. So, like it has information about a build and SCM and all of that stuff, whereas a queue event and metadata is looking different. And the reason behind putting this here, it was also taken from one of the Knative service for Sockeye, and it was helping us visualize, and it was just understanding that any service which is being built on using cloud events should be able to put or set filters, so it should know what it is going to get. I think that was the inspiration behind putting all of that information about events here. Does that answer your question, Maddie?
Yeah, it does. Thanks for that.
I'm just adding the link to our HackMD docs to the plugin. I realized that we had 2 links to the article, not the actual plugin, which is kind of too bad. But there, so the source is there. Awesome. Any other last minute questions before we wrap up? Okay, great. Thank you once again, Shruti. That was a fantastic presentation and great work. And for me, it's really nice because you know, working on this project and having support Shruti, it's really been great how the event SIG has been really supportive. What we've talked about in the Interop SIG has fed into it, and the wider CDF community. So that has been really, really great experience for me and for the entire project. So thank you all. Okay, so that's it for today's meeting, unless there's any last minute topics or questions to bring up or action items. Okay, thank you all for being here, and we shall see
Thank
you
you very
in a
much.
few weeks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.